Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jessica Lorimer, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Yay, Poddies! We are here mid-August. This is the day that Sam is supposed to be home. Oh my goodness, how excited can I be? Yeah, just all the things. At the time of recording this, obviously it's nowhere near, but still, I kind of feel like I'm going to live today vicariously. I'm going to be like, oh my God, I'm so excited about all these things that are happening today, just like they are. So here's the thing, as you're listening to this, I'm probably, wandering around my living room, having a little dance party with myself, popping some cool music onto Spotify, cleaning. Those are the last minute things that I tend to be doing. But this episode, I wanted to talk about writing for your audience. Now, I'm not a copywriter, so don't worry, I'm not going to get involved in lots of copy skills and things like that. But I wanted to talk about the psychology behind communicating with your audience. And so maybe that's what I should have actually called it. Maybe I should have called it communicating with your audience and selling to them effectively so they buy stuff and feel good. So maybe I should have called it that. But hey ho, we live, we learn, and we're lazy about titles sometimes. Now, this came about because I've actually been checking in with some of my awesome masterminders recently. We do this thing in the mastermind where every 3 months we do what I call a QCI, a quarterly check-in, where I go through and make them record a ton of facts and figures so I can dig into their metrics and basically stalk their businesses. It's really good fun. I like it a lot. And it gives us things to discuss on their one-to-one calls, and it gives us things to look at and track from one quarter to another to understand like why they're being so successful or where they can test and tweak things. And it's actually a really, really interesting exercise. I also do it with my amazing Evolve students as well. And it's really, really enjoyable to watch, what happens quarter to quarter and the kind of growth that they are experiencing. But I digress. I was looking back through these quarterly check-ins recently, and one of my amazing masterminders, the lovely Poddie Mark Simpson. If you haven't connected with Mark yet, please do. He is founder of Boostly, and he helps hospitality owners get more direct bookings through their website so that they can avoid TripAdvisor and Airbnb and all the other people who take a percentage of the cash. But Mark is an avid Poddie. He's actually been on the show and he has regularly Instagrammed about the show, which I massively appreciate because we all know I can't use Insta. And he had written on one of his QCI check-ins that he actually has an Evernote folder of things that I say. And he wrote, I have a Jess Lorimer Evernote folder and I go and cherry pick in there when I need something. And I just thought that's brilliant. Like, that's a really, really cool thing to say. And Mark is a really, really cool guy. He is preparing for an incredibly busy summer and he's doing some really, really epic things in his community. So I just wanted to shout that out. And it made me reflect on the fact that actually, there are occasions when I say some pretty cool stuff and where I do some pretty cool stuff and where my ability to communicate really does help me not just sell to clients, but also retain clients, manage difficult situations and scenarios, and just kind of build my business and brand in a different way. So I wanted to record an actionable episode about what you can do when it comes to your sales communication and how you can make it better. So whatever format that takes. Now you could use this for podcasting, you could use it for YouTubing, you could use it for, LinkedIning or newsletters or whatever you like. But I wanted to share some of my top tips because I think that communication is one of these things that even though we're in this online space, that actually we struggle with now because communication is so accessible. Because we're so pre-programmed to choose the quick or easy option, it actually makes us really bad communicators and it makes us lazy communicators. And I'm not talking about, you have to write the elongated versions of every word, although if you write you are instead of your, like really, 2 letters instead of 4. Text speak is one of my pet hates. I really don't get it. My mum actually still uses it in 2019. Occasionally she'll write things like GR8 and I feel like I'm back in the early noughties. But yeah, it's one of those things. Communication, good communication is important, and good sales communication is It's just integral to your business and the survival, and I was going to say thrival, but that's not even a word, but it's true, the thrival of your business moving forward. So let's dig into some of the top ways that I think you can use, or the top tips I think you can use to communicate better and land more sales. The first one for me is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. So have you ever heard that phrase that is, walk a mile in somebody else's shoes? That way you're a mile away and you have their shoes. I've always really liked that phrase, just as an FYI, and I've always kind of imagined myself doing it to Dorothy from Wizard of Oz, because then I'd have a really cool pair of red glittery shoes and be a mile away with magic shoes. How awesome would that be? Life made. But it's one of those things that I think is underrated. Empathy, most people refer to it as, but I think that sometimes in this world of particularly internet marketing, we're so desperate to kind of get to the good stuff and get to the main goal and, perhaps try and overcome the fact that we feel a little bit awkward about selling stuff by just being super direct about it, that we forget that other people are exactly that. They're human. They're going through their own stuff. They're going about their own day. They're thinking their own thoughts. They've got their own problems and issues and obstacles. And so sometimes some of the content I read online, I just think, wow, do you actually know any other human beings? Like, have you ever met a human before? Or are you just preaching? Because the thing about communication and actually wanting people to buy your stuff means that you have to be able to demonstrate that you understand what it's like to be them, or that you are empathetic about their situation. I'll put this into context. I work with some amazing people who do genuinely incredible things that I've never done and never experienced. I work with some incredible people who work within the fertility space, and yet I don't want children. I work with some amazing people who work in the adult education space, and yet I've never been a teacher. I work with some awesome people who work in manufacturing. I cannot even draw, let alone make anything, let alone run an entire business about making stuff. The only thing I'm good at is selling. And the only way that I can communicate that I empathize or understand is to focus on the only problem that I can solve for them. It's not my job to show up and go, hey, I understand what it must be like to be a nutritional therapist in this market. Or, hey, I know what it must be like to be a, taxi driver who's trying to build an entire firm in the current economic climate. I've no idea. So I don't say that. You communicate to show that you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And you can say, hey, I know what it's like to struggle with sales. I know what it's like to be worried about how next month's mortgage is going to be paid. I know what it would feel like if I never had to worry about paying my bills again. I know what it would feel like if I could just take random holidays every few months of the year and enjoy myself. There are different ways to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and they don't always have to be connected necessarily to the pain. Sometimes they can be connected to what that person actually wants to achieve. Sometimes they can be connected to a transformation that you've helped somebody else achieve. There are lots of different ways to do it, but the worst thing that I see online is when we just try and force people to have the same opinion. They make these blanket statements. If you're not profitable, it's because you don't go offline networking. Okay, sure. If you say that in the wrong crowd, like, that's a room that's going to lynch you, albeit online, because they won't be there in person. But if you say, hey, I know what it feels like to go into a room full of people and have it branded as networking, but you secretly know that it's just an opportunity for accountants and local lawyers to get together and moan. Yep, everybody's been there. Or everybody's thought about it. Or people can laugh because they are the accountant and lawyer and have thought, yep, this is me. So try and put yourself in a situation where you can understand what it's like to be somebody in your audience. What is their problem? What actually are they struggling with? What do they actually want to achieve? What are their key desires? What's their key focus? Be clear about those things, be specific, and be able to talk about them in a way that makes them feel like either you've been in that situation or you know that situation so well that, of course, you're the person that can help them solve it, because you can describe it, you can talk about it. You might not have been through it, but you've demonstrated a healthy emotional intelligence, and they can trust that you're the person that's going to be able to take them through to the other side. Another thing about communication, and this is a controversial one. So Perhaps I should get a controversy bell. I literally just forgot in my head how to say controversy. I was like, controversy? Nope. But perhaps I should get one, because we've had a few controversial points over the last few episodes, and this is another one. So here's the thing about sales. If you want to be successful at selling, you have to be likable. Now, you don't have to be likable to all people. You don't have to be all things to all people. But to a select few in the world, you have to be likable. It makes a massive difference when it comes to selling, and it's actually something that we completely disregard in communication. Now, before you start thinking, oh my God, but being likable means I basically have to be, Russell Howard or some other kind of comedian and make people laugh and be really nice to people and have no boundaries. That's not what it means at all, okay? Being likable means that to a select group of people, however large or small that group may be, I say that based on the fact that I can count my friends on like 2 hands. But being likable means that to a select group of people, you share similar values, you share similar standards, you are able to be interesting to those people, that you are, in the dictionary term, pleasant, easy to like, and friendly. Pleasant, easy to like, and friendly to a select group of people. Now, obviously, each group of people is different, right? So if I'm not likable to people who agree with certain things that I don't agree with, like racism, bigotry, small-mindedness, chauvinism, I kind of don't care. Like, I'm not really bothered if those people do not get all the warm and fuzzies from me, because guess what? I don't really like them, so I'm not working hard to be liked by them. But one of the things that I'm seeing a lot at the moment is that entrepreneurs are so desperate to teach and to preach and to, soapbox or whatever, that they actually aren't likable anymore. They're ramming all this stuff down our throat. You can't get away from it. And I've talked about this before, right? I go onto my Facebook newsfeed and every other post is like, are you fat? That's just the ads, right? Someone on Facebook somewhere has got to be able to sort this. But there are all these posts and they're negative and they're boring. And they're from people who previously I might have actually thought was pretty likable. And now I'm just like, oh God, you're preaching at me about my weight again. Just sod off. Get a life, right? And so I unfollow them or I mute them. And then eventually after that 30-day period where they bring them back, I just delete them entirely. Now, I'm not saying don't talk about your business. So far from it. But I'm saying be a good person. Don't be an asshole, because it doesn't get you clients. And I've seen some really interesting examples, particularly over the last 18 months, of people that actually, I may not have known personally, but I have quite a lot of respect for being good at their job, for being able to get people results, for being visible, for giving out good material, who've just become really unlikable. Perhaps they've got a little bit, well, not even a little bit, perhaps they've got a lot arrogant. Perhaps they don't treat their audiences as nicely as they once did. Perhaps they've started commenting really negatively on other people's posts about stuff that really doesn't concern them. It's not likable. And we don't buy from people we don't like. I know that we always talk about know, like, and trust, and it's a big thing, but the biggest thing really is the liking and the trusting. Knowing who somebody is doesn't really make you want to buy from them. It helps. If you don't know who they are, you can't buy from them. But the biggest pieces are about liking somebody and trusting them. If you trust them to get results for you, but you don't like them, you're way less likely to buy. Psychologically, you're way less likely to buy than you are if you meet somebody that you like and trust. Now, obviously, those two things, they're a couple. They have to go together. You have to like and trust somebody to buy, right? Or you have to trust somebody and grow to like them. Or you just have to trust them to get results. Trust can stand on its own in certain cases. But being likable is something that nobody can teach, that only you can learn. So start thinking about how you actually show up, and this isn't just about when you put out your content. It's not about when you go onto the internet and you write your blog, or when you record your podcast and you really try and be likable. I always say this to people, like, I don't really like people all that much. I said it on the Upreneur stage. I was like, I'm not a people person. Okay. I never have been. And so it always shocks my friends when they're like, Jess managed to build a business with nothing but people. And it's really bizarre. I am in people-oriented careers. And yet I don't like a lot of people. There are many, many people that I'm just like, ugh, I don't like them. I don't like ignorant people. I don't like bigoted people. I don't like racist people. Like, I've got a whole list of people that I do not like. And so my generalization consistently has always been, I just don't like people. It's that I like select groups of people. And to those select groups of people, I'm a likable person. I am occasionally funny, sometimes entertaining, without meaning to be. I am trustworthy. I'm knowledgeable. I'm an expert. But I don't ram it at people. When people come up to me in the street, which bizarrely has happened, and people have been like, oh my God, you're the girl from the podcast. By the way, I never know how people understand that. I look a lot better on that podcast profile picture than I do in person generally. But people do. They come up to me and they say, oh my goodness, I really like you. I like your dog. I like the fact that, you laugh at your own jokes. One person actually told me, Josie Broxham, when she met me for the first time, that she liked that I laughed like Jimmy Carr. And now that's all I can think about when I laugh. So there we go. 3 years on. Thank you very much, Josie. But being likable isn't something you can teach, and you have to do it when you're showing up. And it's all the time when you're showing up. So for example, I see people who put out actually quite interesting content. I think, they're cool. And then I follow them, and then I see what else they're doing online, and I look at how they treat people behind closed doors, and I think, oh no, you're not someone I want to spend time with. I see this most often, unfortunately, in paid communities. I'm a guest expert for a bunch of paid communities. I run trainings for different communities. I have my own paid communities. And one of the things that I really intensely find uncomfortable is that some people are very, very likable in their own content when they're out there and they're Instagramming and they're putting stuff out on Facebook and they're being really friendly in their own content. And behind the scenes, they're slagging off everybody you've ever met. Or they're really rude to my team when they've forgotten their password and logins. Or they show up and they try and constantly win. That's tiring. Right? And those are things that affect our likability factor when we communicate with people. If you're the person who always has to win the argument, but you're not learning anything and you don't empathize and you're not showing people that you care, that's very draining and it makes you unlikable in that instance. Okay. And if that's something you consistently do across wider communities and wider spaces, it doesn't matter how funny your blog is. It doesn't matter how great your podcast is. People find it difficult to interact with you and communicate with you because they're so afraid that every time you have to win instead of listening, right? If you're the person who slates a ton of people and you are consistently going around in other paid communities and saying, oh, well, I worked with this person, they were awful, or I worked with that person, they were awful, or I have this client and they did X, Y, and Z and it's just awful. Guess what? What are people going to associate you with? Well, it's not like being happy-go-lucky. Now, again, this doesn't mean don't do it. It doesn't mean don't take strategic advice on certain situations or obstacles, but really think about how you're coming across. A few years ago, we had a similar situation in the online space, but it wasn't about likability. It was about reality and results. And people would be in certain groups and they'd be going, I'm a 6-figure business owner and I am great at X, Y, Z. And in other groups, they'd be saying, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent this month. And it was very difficult. There was this weird discord between one version of them and the other version of them. And that's the same thing when it comes to likability. Be consistently who you are and be likable to the select group of people that you are likable to, or groups. Don't try and be somebody else, because then you lose out on your select few groups. And actually, over time, you just end up not being able to pretend to be likable for these other people anymore. Anyway, it gets too hard, right? So that's the second thing about communication. Choose how you are going to be likable. Is it through empathy? Is it through sharing a journey? Is it through just showing up as who you are? One of my clients, Lisa Johnson, she's phenomenal at this. Lisa shows up. She's been on the podcast, epic episode a few weeks ago, and she just is who she is. She's very unapologetic about that. She puts behind the scenes stories on Instagram sometimes, and occasionally I see them because she's always at the top of my feed, which again is a brilliant thing for being visible, but she doesn't shy away from who she is. She makes the most of it. She shows, these hilarious photos of her kids, and she, you know, shows the cool stuff that she's doing with them. She shows the times that she's out for dinner, and she talks about, recently she did this all ridiculous thing that I would never do in a million years. She went up in this like crane and had dinner and had to be like strapped in, harnessed in or something, and she talked about it on Instagram stories. And do you know what, for a lot of people that makes her accessible, it makes her authentic, it makes her likable. She talks about those kinds of things, that she shares those kinds of experiences that she's living every day. For other people, it repels them, right? Because again, you can't be likable to everybody. So that's the second thing. When you're communicating, if you want to be successful at selling, start thinking about your likability factor. And if you're finding that consistently people are, you know, not engaging with you, or people are avoiding you, or, you know, people don't want to get into conversations with you, think about whether you're in the right space. You know, are you likable to the select group of people that are there? Or are you acting in a way that actually is turning people off, right? Because that's the other thing we have to consider. And I bear in mind, you know, I don't practice things that I don't preach. There have been times in my life where I have acted in a really terrible way, where I haven't been the best person I could have been, where I haven't been the best version of myself that I could have been. And where frankly, I've acted like a bit of a toad. And sometimes you have to look at it and go, okay, actually, I'm not behaving in a way that's appropriate here. So how can I change my behavior, and what can I do differently so that people understand that actually I'm quite a nice person. I was just having a bad day, right? Few and far between. So be honest when it comes to your communication. And then finally, when we're talking about communication, when we're talking about selling, you know, if we've put ourselves in other people's shoes, we're talking about situations that resonate with them, if we're likable and trustworthy, it's about transparency. If you want to sell something, sell it, right? Just say, go buy this thing. Now, I know that it's awkward, and I know that nobody wants to do it, because let's face it, who wants to write buy this thing in an email? Because that is uncomfortable, and it is a little bit weird, and it does feel a little bit like, oh my God, I'm really putting myself out here for rejection. But at the same time, if you always hide your sales opportunities in long-winded emails that maybe are really fun and really engaging and whatever, people miss the main call to action, which is go and do this. So make it clear. You know, I had a client recently who is phenomenal, and, you know, she's a really impressive person that she just does the work. She's incredibly coachable. I'm not going to give out her name because I think that, you know, sometimes people would rather not be referred to, but she's phenomenally coachable, and she just does the work. She doesn't get upset about being coached. She listens to advice and she just implements. And recently she was struggling with content, and she was saying that people didn't act on the calls to action that she was putting out there. And we looked at it, and we looked at, you know, her content, social media content, her newsletter content, and things like that. And I mentioned that the calls to action were being buried because there was so much else there to look at, so much else there to do. And your audience can't take more than one thing at a time, right? We have to focus on one topic at a time to really get the best results. And so she changed it. She went, okay, cool. She didn't go, oh, well, I think that's wrong or whatever. She went, okay, cool, I'm going to test that. And she did. And it worked. And now her clients are clicking, and her prospects are clicking on her posts. They're clicking in her emails. They're doing things. They're taking action. They're buying, because she's being transparent. And it wasn't that she was trying to hide it before, but it was that, you know, when we create content and when we're communicating with people, often we're so worried about the sales bit, the saying of the sales bit, that we forget that actually people just want to know, what does Jess want from me? What does Jess want me to do today? And actually we forget that people have become, because we have this weird thing around communication now where it is accessible, where we can all text and WhatsApp and Facebook message and this and that, and everything's designed to be quick and easy. We forget about tone, and we're very conscious that we don't want to get it wrong. But transparency is the key. Give people one focus. You know, I'm always saying this about program creation. Solve one problem with one solution and then move on, and sell another program with another solution and then move on. It's the same with your content. It shouldn't have 3 or 4 or 5 huge bits. It should be super clear to your audience that it's like, right, okay, this blog is focused on X, this podcast is focused on Y. It makes it easier for them to come on the journey with you. So there you go. Hopefully that has helped give you a little bit of insight into some sales psychology there and some reasons that you should be really working on communication skills this summer. You know, it isn't just about how to write the perfect sales email. A lot of this is in how you show up every single day in each interaction. So really be thinking about what you are doing. Are you putting yourself in other people's shoes? Are you being likable to your select group of people? And most importantly, are you being transparent about what you want people to do? And here you go. Here it is in action, in total transparency. If you have enjoyed this episode, I would like you to go to iTunes and submit a review. iTunes is being revamped at the moment and they are loving reviews. And I would like more reviews because more reviews means that they chuck us into the charts and that we get more new poddies, which is always really good. So if you have 5 minutes spare in your day to day and you think I could take some time out, I could do that for Jess. She shows up every week for me. I wouldn't mind doing it first, seems all right. Then I would really, really appreciate that. I am going to go. I'm going to get everything ready for the amazing day, hopefully, that I'm going to have ahead, should everything go to plan. And I will be back in Friday's episode, which is an exciting one. On Friday, we have the lovely Ali Lafeva on the podcast, and she is awesome. I will see you then.